Well, welcome to a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Today, without making it too formal, I'm your host, David. We've got Dakota. Dakota, the one and only engineer at Netrix, and also a Renaissance man by night. So, introductions. I'm all over the place. Dakota mentioned that he was had a pretty good preface to a podcast today, talking with some of his buddies about. Um, we were actually about to get into it. Let me give you the floor here if you want to open up with that.
Now I have to remember what it was. There's been
Oh,
there's been too many things over the past couple of months. Like just looking at the state of the world in general, and even not just the world. We live here in America, so I primarily focus on what happens here.
the
Um,
terrestrial news.
yeah, and just we could spend scholars will and historians will spend hours teaching people of the present moment right now in the future of what happened in America from the early 2000s, or really from the Reagan administration all the way to Trump and beyond.
Yeah.
So a lot of the issues that we have today started with Reagan, of course. We don't really need to go into any of that because we could spend all day long talking about history, and we could spend all day long talking about what the future could be, but I think what we should focus on is what could we do now to resolve problems. And when I say resolve problems, I don't mean running for political office or anything like that.
Okay.
I've been watching the show The Chosen recently, which is about the life of Christ from when he starts his ministry onward, and it's the version of Christ that is the real version of Christ. It's the, for lack of a better term, hippie liberal Christ, um,
Okay.
who is a rebel and looks at the modern church of his time, criticizes it, not necessarily its doctrine, but how
Yeah.
its doctrine is leveraged against the common man. And
Oh, his doctrine is what common man. Okay.
we're very much in that type of time today where conservatives, the conservative party, they're not true conservatives. If they were truly conservative, they would actually, air quote, believe in climate change. But they say, we don't believe in that crap. Well, it's not a matter of belief, it's a matter of objective scientific measurement.
Well, let me pause you right there just to kind of dig into what you said. What then would be a true conservative by those lights? Would it be somebody that more so conforms to religious ideals? Yeah, on which.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Conservatism is traditionally someone who holds to some form of tradition. But if
Okay.
we just look at the term conservative, it's conservation. That's
Concern.
to conserve. Yeah, that's what it means.
Mm.
So ideally, in a society, your conservative party are the people who focus on the existing system and ensure that it does not get corrupted, that it does not fall apart, that it does
Oh,
not
sure. Yeah.
destroy the things around it. Conserve the system and everything around it. They are
In this
not doing
case,
that.
market capitalism in its current manifestation, albeit not perfectly Adam Smith's envisionment, but it is a market system nonetheless. They're conserving in this
Yeah,
case.
and ultimately, it really doesn't matter what economic system is used. People are people, and as long as greed exists, then there's going to be problems regardless of the system utilized.
That's actually an interesting area to apply a little pressure or emphasis, which is when it comes to people and greed and the nature of scarcity and how that affects human behavior. And to think about two conversations. On the one hand, moral responsibility, very Peterson kind of own up to X, and in this case, greed. But with scarce resources, often puts circumstances where uh, or abundance. You play with the dynamics of the market. So scarcity on one end, abundance on the other.
But it's
Abundance is
false scarcity. Look at how many cars are in junkyards, how many abandoned homes there are. Over
right.
billions of tons of food gets wasted in this country every single year. Look at how much plastics are wasted. It's not a scarcity issue within the market. It's a consumer issue because we've taken the pride that went into art. Harrison Harrison Ford, uh, Henry Ford
Forward. Yep.
creating the Model T. That was less an act of capitalism and more an act of art via the form of engineering and mechanics.
Interesting. Okay. I how so? I mean, I think I agree with you. How so?
Now, if you're passionate about something, you're going to
Yeah.
put your entire soul and being into that. You're going to actually pour emotions into the act of creating it. When you
Yeah.
do that, you come at it from the perspective, I want this to be the best quality. It has to be the best product, the best invention, because it has to beat everyone else who's doing the same thing. They're pouring their soul into it, and I have to make mine as unique and as efficient and as good as possible.
Right.
We don't do that anymore. The iPhone is a great example of that. There are no innovations. Arguably, Apple has never been innovative. They
Right.
took multiple technologies that already existed and they combined them together. There were already MP3 players. There were already smartphones. They were Android devices. But Apple comes in using that technology. They're generally 2 or 3 years behind. And we see that
Yeah.
with their current change over to USB Type C because Europe pressured them with antitrust.
So I wonder to okay, so yeah, Europe pressured them with antitrust, but then also what about natural gravitations from like the what seems to be a market dynamic, or not beyond a market dynamic, just an earthly dynamic of what's the name of that? Ephemeralization, doing more with less. So the act of compiling a computer keyboard, TV screen into a computer, into a smaller computer, like
In a way,
is
that's
that a movement
natural
for this type?
evolution.
Yeah, so I guess that's the question. Is it more of a natural evolution, or is it something that we're really going to just focus on the proximate cause that led up to it, and maybe even blame go as far as to blame some of these companies for not being creative enough? I guess
And
creative enough would truly be novel creation as opposed to just
right.
pure. Okay.
And arguably, I like to consider myself a systems engineer instead of a solutions engineer
Yeah.
because I
Oh,
like
okay.
looking at systems and analyzing them. I can see things that other people don't see, and most of the time they're aware it's there, they just don't care. So there's nothing wrong with Apple taking those existing technologies, smashing them together into a montage, and making some form of relatively novel product, or arguably a novel product that combines multiple pre-existing technologies together. There's nothing wrong with that. The
Yeah.
issue is with the quality of the product from the aspect of designed obsolescence and
Yeah.
the inability to repair it yourself.
That was going to be my second point. Yeah.
John Deere, there's a reason why the whole right to repair argument has been occurring. Because if you look
Okay.
at the history of just technology in general, you've got a farmer who has a steam tractor and he's plowing his field. He can fix that steam tractor himself. They're simple machines. It's just a bunch of
Yeah.
mechanical moving parts. And if you understand the basic physics behind uh, a steam engine, then it's going to be very easy for you to fix. Not only
Yeah.
that, you can get the parts relatively easy, or you can machine them and build them yourself. You can't do that with
Well,
the modern
yeah.
tractors.
Oh, okay. I see. So this kind of reminds me a little bit of, well, I mean, standardization to some degree, and I think the early adaptation of the musket, uh, the person that made the musket, if I recall the story correctly, was also the same person that kind of showed how the parts for the musket, if they were to be made standardized, could really set a precedence in the market for making parts and replacing those parts when instead of having to scrap the whole product, you get into a more modular, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's happened with almost every single iteration of technology. When we got to the point where we had lever action rifles and revolvers and things like that, in the early expansionist era of the United States as we go west, Colt ends up developing the Colt revolver. And it was revolutionary because he did what you just said. He said, all right, we can standardize the production of the gun. We can make the barrel in one factory or on one assembly line. We can make this on another, and we can combine all these parts together that have been precision machined, allowing us to mass produce the firearm just like they did with muskets previously. But this is a more complex machine. Eventually, we get to the point where Henry Ford is like assembly, because the assembly line, they claim Henry Ford is the one who made the assembly line for automobiles. Yeah, but
yeah,
not for everything else. Like the idea of an assembly line already existed. He just took that idea, leveraged it, and made a product out of it, and made a lot of money.
yeah.
Now,
Uh,
with that
yeah.
evolution of mass production comes mass consumerism. And in the day, let's say pre-Cold War era, and even part of the Cold War era, you had so many different car manufacturing companies. And they all had their own unique design. They built and designed their own engines. The bodywork was noticeably different. But with today's vehicles, you look at an SUV, regardless of who manufactures it, an SUV is an SUV is an SUV. The
Yeah.
bodywork looks exactly the same. They're all using the same type of motors for the most part. None of it is made here at home in America. It might be assembled in America, but most of it is made overseas, where it's cheaply manufactured because the capitalists and the politicians here in America did not want to have to increase wages with inflation for the
Mhm.
working class. They'd rather take that money and line their own pockets. When at the end of the day, while sure, the capitalists came up with the initial idea, but all research and development since that initial kickoff has been done by
Yeah.
the working class American, and the same with building the product. And they get
I
paid
would even go
pennies on
so
the
far
dollar.
as I would even go so far as to argue that what led them was more so uh, the need to follow science as a benchmark to find efficiency, as opposed to whatever the market kind of. I feel like there's a lot of the times capitalists, especially, are ready to defend the market on a number of fronts that they think is inherent to the market, when some of these dynamics transcend the market. They
Yeah.
go beyond that. And
Because the
like
first
another
human being that figured out how to light fire, he didn't do that because of free market capitalism encourages him to
It was
do
a
it.
trade that occurred that made the fire
Yeah.
spark for him. Like
The
that has
same
nothing
with
to do with it.
bows, arrows, armor, shields, swords, halberds, pikes, everything. It wasn't done
So
because of a free market. It was done because someone was like, I got this idea, and it's part of my
yeah,
passion, and I'm going to pursue it.
exactly, exactly. So then, when you look at some components where are not completely necessary, and especially less so with technology today, labor for income has been a topic on my mind a lot. Which is, I mean, it seems as though people today find that to be the most utopian idea in the world. We live in a
Crazy
day that's
motherfuckers.
increasingly more and more possible. Go ahead.
I said they're a bunch of crazy motherfuckers.
Yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the fact is, where there is a natural scarcity, we can strategically build a sustainable abundance per locality for the area afflicted. So if there's poverty across West Africa, that's where you kind of build the technical mechanisms around to directly provide access to those resources without the need for labor or for income. Like that seems to me something totally possible. It seems so impossible because of the bureaucracy and the way that the presidential cycle is supposed to be the inducer of change in the big American, country that we are in the international stage. So
And that's
I
why
don't
the
know.
rest of the world laughs at us because we're supposed to be this paragon of bipartisanship, but instead we swing from one extreme to the next each election at every level.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And one year, American aid might be coming to help a country, and that's planned to be happening for the next 10 years. But 8 years later, another president and their administration comes along, and they revoke it. So we cannot be relied on except for our military-industrial complex.
Is it because they make decisions apart from what happens at the international, well, at the level of like, in this case, national politics and international politics?
It's because everyone has this idea that they know best. Everyone does, even myself. Everyone has
The
this idea that they know
military-industrial
best.
complex.
Yeah, so when a new administration comes along, they go, hey, we don't agree with X, Y, and Z. We're going to roll it back. We're going to stop it right here, right now. And that happens.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Well, what's interesting, I think, about that is that the military-industrial complex, with its chain of command, functions more like less like a democracy, more like a monarchy. If we're going to compare the traditional kinds of dressings, but
Maybe a
you can kind of
technocracy combined with a monarchy, yeah.
yeah. Because I mean they have all that extra special equipment that's really at their disposal, whereas we have something at the awareness of the national level in America that we can use to benefit us or to help us from, let's say, it's our nuclear button. It takes the whole effort of the country to get on board with the decision in the first place. And whereas, yeah, when you have choice, it seems to stall the process of making the choice. When you have a direct totalitarian regime, it's or maybe that's not the right connotations. But when you have a militaristic regime like our industrial complex, yeah, they do. It's not arguable that they get shit done.
Well, and here's an example: the B-2 Spirit bomber developed by Northrop Grumman. They don't keep those in other countries. There's only
Oh,
like a couple of dozen of them. They're made in the 1980s to the early 2000s. They all stay here in America. The only one that has ever crashed due to sensor malfunction and heavy rain because they were doing training exercises in a foreign country, an allied country, joint training exercise. But every time one of those bombers goes on a mission, like in Iraq or Afghanistan when we were invading there for resources, they would fly out of
right.
America and fly to their target, drop their bombs from high altitude, turn around, head home in time for supper.
Because that saves them the trip of having to redeposit the bombs in another location. They could just go straight home because it was
Yep.
already from the home that they took. Got it.
Long
Oh,
range bomber. They don't have to have a forward operating base. They can just leave from here. And if they have to land, they can land on an American aircraft carrier, which we have just produced 12. We're producing 12 more. We just finished producing one, and it is the new Assault class aircraft carrier. For a lack of better term, it has the
yeah.
power to topple almost any nation on the planet, a single one.
Slightly facetious. Does it have the power to stop the alien technology that is lurking in the dark shadow of the government?
No. But who knows? And on that point, I saw, of course, it's 4chan, so you can't trust anything on it. It's probably just someone LARPing. Um, but
Can we get into that? Let me just flag that. Go ahead. I'm flagging that point. I need to go back to 4chan. Yeah.
yeah, um, I think I sent it to you. I don't remember. It was a bunch of screenshots of this 4chan conversation of this dude talking about the recent UFO sightings. They are all unmanned drones. They are produced for specific roles and missions, and
Dave send me this.
they
Yes.
leave out
Yeah.
of a mobile construction facility from the depths of the ocean that hangs out around the Bermuda Triangle.
So okay, that's a fantastic
And it's supposedly been here
claim
for
to
over at
yeah.
least 100 years, probably longer. It's an automated station, is what they say.
See, I can't be ultimately skeptical with something like that. I mean, I am, but
Yeah,
I
same
can't
here.
ultimately claim like some conviction or certainty like the people that have death threats on them have, because it's just not within my experience to be like, oh yeah, I can confirm that. But just the thought that that's there and the level of secrecy of people coming out, it makes you wonder, like, yeah, there's pretty gnarly stories, but is it technically possible if an alien civilization can be here? You take a look at science and you see Proxima B and even earlier kind of stars
Hmm.
and planetary bodies that look like they can support life. Why the heck not? Different alien species is another claim around, that there's several species that are already here.
Well, look at the stuff in Mexico that just happened.
What do you think about? Do you think that's a hoax? Do you think that's
If it
or
is a
that?
hoax, it is very well done. Very well done.
I heard about it 2 minutes. I think it was the first news media source. I'm not going to claim to be the first that my content was 2 minutes fresh, but like no. I think there was a. I caught it really early with this one guy who said, my friend I think I sent you this, is recording live from the Mexican government, and so there wasn't any really like spin as far as
Well, and they
political
recorded the
commentary.
MRI scan and everything. That was like a 2 hour live stream on YouTube of them putting this little tiny body that looks like a little like ET gray fey thing and scanning it under MRI, and it's got like they're just drooling over this specimen, and they announced, they said that they're taking DNA samples, they're going to sequence it and figure out what the DNA looks like. They're
Right.
supposed to be sharing all of these results with the world, and they're asking the world to also run tests on samples because they're going to make that available. That's what they claim. Now, if that's
Yeah.
true, then we have to ask, is this really an extraterrestrial, or is it a native species to our system?
Yes. Great point. Excellent point. I mean, we have a rich biosphere of different species. Who knows that this is something extraterrestrial?
But it might not
Uh,
even be from Earth. It could be from one of the other planets in the solar system. It could be from a different time, a different dimension. There's so many different rabbit holes you can go down. An example: Saturn's moon Enceladus has it's a ice moon, but under its like 2 mile thick ice crust is an ocean. And what spews out of it, from what we've gotten from spectrography, I can never pronounce it, a spectroscope, yeah,
spectroscopy. I can't keep
spectroscopy,
that myself.
is that all of the, because it's spewing water crystals into space from the high pressure underneath, and from what we've analyzed, all of the components needed for life to form exist, so far as we know.
So
There
far,
might be
yeah.
stuff that we don't know that needs to take place, but there's possibly hydrothermal vents underneath it. There's liquid water, and where there's liquid water, there's generally life.
Yeah.
So there could be a civilization under some of these ice moons in our system that have evolved over time. Who the fuck knows? We don't, because we're
Yeah.
too busy squabbling over who gets the scarcity of resources on this planet to actually do anything
Exactly.
about it. Now that
And
being
that's going to be
said,
another issue. Yeah.
if going back to this automated platform under near the Bermuda Triangle,
Right.
let's assume it's real. Let's just posit it is real. All right.
Okay.
If it is real, they need complete self-sustainability. It is not logically acceptable for a supply chain to exist from an interstellar standpoint unless you're moving something vast. So for any food,
Who said
water,
that?
anything like
Yeah.
that, basic components, they're going to have to be able to produce it completely by themselves.
Because you said it doesn't make sense to have any interplanetary. What was the word you used?
Interplanetary logistics.
Logistics. So we trade, in other words, capitalism extending towards an extraterrestrial species.
Right.
It doesn't make sense because I mean I could just get issues. What comes to mind for you is why that just wouldn't work at all.
Well, the first thing, unless they have some form of advanced cloaking technology, which they possibly do, They would have to, from their home system, transport raw materials or raw components all the way here, get them planet side and into the
What are they going to
facility.
carry? Yeah, they're not going to lug their own stuff from God knows how far.
When there's an abundance of resources in the
Mm.
ocean and in the Earth's crust, they could have the drilling technology, the refining technology, and the manufacturing technology to harvest raw materials and produce it themselves. Now, there's actually a term used for this. It was coined by John von Neumann, who is an Hungarian American mathematician, physicist, computer scientist, engineer, and polymath. One
Sounds
of my
absolutely amazing.
favorites. Just a
Yeah,
fascinating individual. But
definitely.
he came up with cause he worked on the Manhattan Project, but he came up with the term or it was coined after him, a von Neumann probe. And what a von
Right.
Neumann probe is a artificial intelligence in a spaceship that has the capacity to harvest resources, build a physical replica, or design new blueprints and build another starship, and then create essentially a copy of its operating system and image it onto the new device, therefore creating, because of the physical differences in hardware, a
Yeah.
slightly altered personality of itself. And the theory is, I think it's
Yeah.
within a couple of 100 years, not even that. If you have faster than light travel, it's even quicker. But non-faster than light travel, um, you could explore the entire galaxy in about 100 years because it's exponential growth with replication.
Wow.
So
I started watching. Kind of blow my mind. You could explore the galaxy. The galaxy, not the.
the
Yeah, I was
galaxy.
hearing the universe. Sorry.
Because let's say we built one, and we sent it. There's actually a book series about this. It's called the Bobbyverse series. But
Nice.
you send a von Neumann probe to Alpha Centauri. Its mission
Yeah.
parameter is, when you get to Alpha Centauri, build a production facility designed to crank out as many replicas of yourself that you can send to new destinations as quickly as possible. And from Alpha Centauri, you start sending more probes to the adjacent star systems. And then at those star systems, repeat the order until you can't anymore.
So that effectively, if I think about like Ages of Empire, where you have a fog on your map and you also have the map not being revealed, you have two different things there. So
Yeah,
a
it's like
von
sending
Neumann
your
probe,
villagers out to build a town center and making more villagers, and sending them out to build more town
yeah,
centers and making even more villagers. Yep,
exactly. And then you explore all the map by strategically planting your town centers around what you envision to be the whole cluster of what
yep.
your of area.
And then all you need is some form of communication system to send the information back to the home world.
Sorry, I got mildly distracted. I just noticed your shirt. No, I will not fix your computer.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
mom got me
yeah.
that shirt because I kept telling her, "Mom, you're the charge nurse of a level 1 trauma center in the operating room. You can massage people's hearts. You can stop arteries from bleeding out. You can hold a scalpel. You can pass instruments. Or you can do all these amazing things. You're telling me you can't Google and figure out why your Netflix is buffering?"
That you know that when you put it like that, it really shows how far the brain ran in one direction but refuses to go to the other.
Yeah,
Another.
but
Um, good
the
stuff.
the aliens, or the UFOs, or the UAPs as they call them now, that we see could possibly be von Neumann probes.
That is an interesting idea. So
Why
von
leave
Neumann
your
probe.
home system if you can do it remotely? We do the same thing. Why bomb an enemy with a fighter jet when you can send a remotely operated drone?
Going back into how von Neumann probes are built, I'm kind of aware of them, but it was new for me to hear how when you explaining it and a lot of the. So the von Neumann probe, does that imply faster than speed of light travel? I think you said.
Nope.
No.
If you have faster than light travel, it happens even quicker, though.
Gotcha. So that's not. pre-assumed in the design of the Von
Right.
Neumann program.
So in the Bobbyverse book, as an example, essentially what happens is this engineer. I can't remember if he's a electrical engineer or a programmer. I think he's an electrical engineer. He ends up signing up for a cryostasis program. When you die, or if you're about to die from a disease, we're going to freeze your body until at some point in the future we can either revive you or fix the problem.
Star Trek episode like that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes to the conference where they're talking about von Neumann probes, because of course you got to set up the book. And he leaves the conference and gets hit by a car and dies. He's got a card on him that says, if this body is found, deliver to X. So the EMS take him there. He gets frozen. Unknown length of time later, he wakes up. But he wakes up to a void. He has no sensory input whatsoever. Just thought. The next thing he knows is he hears a voice. And someone starts talking to him. And they're being very careful to make sure that he doesn't figure out that he's actually a computer now. Eventually, they let that out. And because he was a sci-fi geek and an electrical engineer, he did not go insane. Everyone else up until this point has basically gone just batshit insane. And they've had to eliminate them. So he goes through this training program, ends up getting put in the rocket, sent into space in the von Neumann probe. A couple other countries are doing the same thing. And they have a gravity drive. Gravity drive is a acceleration at 1g. I think it goes up to like 5g. So 5 times Earth gravity acceleration per second. So whatever 9 point something meters times 5 is. Per second. And so that, essentially what they do is you then speed up until you reach a certain velocity that you then have to turn the ship around and start slowly slowing down, or you're going to shoot past the star system. So it takes them like 8 years to get to the destination. But during that time frame, and this was the problem with the probes because they uploaded human minds into it, they go insane because they're removed from their humanity. So he ends up developing, because he's a programmer, he like, the scientist that woke him up and did this was against the government's policy of building safeguards into the system. And so he damages the safeguard so that way the dude can bypass his mission directive and programming and fend for himself. Because he knows other nations are sending probes, and in order to actually win, he's going to have to be able to think outside the box, and he can't do that within the constraints of the government-mandated mission. So he ends up eliminating his explosive device, which is a nuclear device designed to blow him up if he deviates too far from mission parameters. He then develops a virtual environment so that way he can experience just like he normally would. And then he codes a cat. And he codes a AI assistant, and he starts coding food and drinks and trying to tailor it to where, all right, this is exactly how I remember coffee tastes like, or how beer tastes like. But since we're in VR, I can get drunk and then I can immediately be sober because I'm a computer. And so he ends up replicating, and since he's a nerd, like, they end up choosing their own names each generation. So like the first one that gets created, he chooses to call himself Riker from Star Trek. His cat's name is Spot, like Data named his cat Spot. His AI is a calamari from Mon Calamari from Star Wars, and he calls him Guppy. So a lot of cool pop culture references in the book. Yeah.
They're like the calamari species.
But he ends up getting to Alpha Centauri, and, well, time to replicate. And ends up replicating and continuing the mission. And eventually they make it back to Earth. Riker goes back to Earth. Earth has gone through nuclear war. There's a bunch of religious fanatics. He ends up solving the problem. I don't remember how, but he ends up solving the problem, essentially
Yeah.
leaving them there and building a colony ship with stasis pods and brings the colonists to Alpha Centauri for the first human colony.
Oh
and
shit.
and that entire
Yeah.
process that I just described took them over a
Yeah.
100 years. But because they're in VR and their computers, they can
Right.
increase or decrease their clock speed. So that, let's say it takes 10 years to get to
Yeah.
Alpha Centauri. From our perspective, it's 10 years, but from the AI's perspective, it's like eight
Yeah.
months because he has sped up his perception of time.
Okay, at the start, because this is in the context of the story that you've been telling me about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the story, you were describing how, I guess, transference of consciousness happens. Uh, I got a little lost at one point, and to be honest, I was wondering if you might re-explain that, and maybe I can re-pivot my more detailed question after hearing that again, because I think there was something there.
Yeah,
What
he
did
he comes to, after an unknown length of time, in a void. No sensory input whatsoever, nothing but his own thoughts.
Thank you. That was it. No sensory input whatsoever. Just thought. So my first thought there is that's a brilliant idea. I wonder if that would be physically possible because memory might just be this sort of fractal of constantly a thing aware of itself, a thing aware of itself in this long continuum, and then that in higher levels of manifestation emerges into perception. I think thinking and well, let me be
It
sure.
parallels John 1 in the beginning was the Word. Because that's the first thing he
Yeah,
experiences other than himself is a voice.
but that's the thing. If you have no sensory input whatsoever, no ability to see or to hear, how do you hear a voice? You have to have some kind of modality that receives. So if it's just thought, then really what he did was he gained the thought. And there's really a question as to whether the thought was given or the thought was originating from himself, leaving open that little quandary there. Anyway, sorry, I just that's one thing that I had to wrestle out loud in listening to that, but that was interesting.
But all of that I just said is, including the UFO thing, is pretext to we need self-sustainability here on this
I agree with
planet,
that.
right
Yeah.
here, right now. In all of that to also say how he replicates is using a 3D printer that's capable of printing at the atomic level.
Oh, see, now this is getting into RBE kind of stuff. This is what Peter Joseph talks about: nanotechnology, recycling, and going back to your earlier point about planned obsolescence. The life cycle of a product is cut off prematurely for the profit motive.
Yep.
And really, its technical longevity can be much, much more extended to what current technological capacities yield. So when we look at that, yeah, it's another reminder of the market from what's holding us back in a way on that front, and failing to connect this to the larger point that I was just making there. Yeah.
Well, and a capitalist is going. Let's. My boss earlier today, when we were talking about this kind of stuff, used toothpaste as an example. He's like, you got a bunch of factory workers in a toothpaste plant. They put the bottle into the machine, they pull the thing, it fills up with toothpaste, they put the cap on it, they throw it back on the assembly line, it gets packaged. You eventually automate that process, and now you don't need those human beings anymore. You can make this. You can actually make more profit by firing them.
Mm-hmm.
But and what I said was, which is what's happening, and what I said was, you're still going to make more profit because you've increased the speed at which you can package toothpaste. Why not now diversify your assets by going to those employees and saying, hey, we're still going to pay you. You don't have to come into work for the next couple of months because what we're going to do next is work on building a new facility, and we want to build a new product. Does anyone in the company have an idea? Let's work together to innovate something new, and you guys are going to be the new part of the, or you're going to be the umbrella under the umbrella organization as a new company, and you're going to be the ones because you already have this experience to kick off this new product, and you're going to be the ones that design it, manage it. You're going to be the board members. It's going to be your responsibility, and we provide the initial capital because we can afford to with this advance in automation.
See, that reminds me of the difference between like of a cooperative where the
Yep.
decisions of the direction of the innovation and the management of the company is all the workers versus top-down LLC or C corp, S corp partnership, any of those other forms that require other decision makers apart from the workers to kind of make decisions on behalf of the workers and for the company and its direction.
It should be a
So,
combo of the two. That
yeah,
hierarchy of managers, VPs, CEOs, what they should be are the people that are adjacent to the employee self-elected and self-organized hierarchy. The employees
yeah,
run the company, and when they need to access certain knowledge silos or they have issues amongst themselves, they launch over to the CEO and say, "Hey, this is what's going on." And the CEO still gets paid. And he gets paid more than the employees because the CEO is ideally that person who can make a major decision and help guide people in the right direction. But he doesn't make astronomically more than the employees. Maybe 10% more, 20% more, but no more than that. And but
and
then
that's
that would
you.
free that CEO up to be the CEO of multiple organizations because he's not
Yeah.
having to waste a bunch of time doing the day-to-day management.
That would be that would make a lot of sense from an efficiency standpoint. Is that you want to free your mind to be able to do more with less,
Right.
more with less, and it goes everywhere.
The CEO should be
Um,
someone who plays with systems.
yeah. So I forgot if I told you, but I was actually trying to start a restaurant, and I got kind of stalled back on that a little bit because of not being able to afford the startup capital.
Yeah.
So I found myself again back on the job hunt and actually landed a job doing some data entry. Work from home. It's got all the perks of like flexible schedule, and I'm
Nice.
teaching again. Uh, um, but what I find really interesting about what you said and the path I'm trying to pave with the restaurant is just where I want to be. So I start with the recognition that I don't want to end up cooking the food and trying to make sales meet every time frame. I'd rather use that as just a stepstone, an early stepstone, and really where I want to get is the point where I can then manage and then hire a manager and then offsource the management
Mm-hmm.
and then look at the more strategic levels up above and just know that I have a company
Sourcing the
with
fresh food, sourcing. You would be the channel partner manager slash owner at that point, essentially. Yeah.
and yeah, so I guess seeing the parallel there, I mean, I feel like I'm heading in a direction where it's going to start from the very concrete and it's going to move up to the very abstract, depending on how fast I move them. But the very concrete is also going to be interesting too, because that's all the footwork of having some taco trucks, on certain events. That Sunday morning mass, will be out there making the tostadas, my dad and I, or whatever. And then there'll be moments where we do our soft opening, our hard opening, grand opening, and then we found a location. It was 500 a month for a 2 year,
It's crazy.
and it was an ideal spot because everywhere I've been looking, there's middlemen vendors that kind of they give you the licensing. They'll help you speed up with like their fast track, and they kind of charge a little bit for that. But they have like a network, like a singular system where you can hire your staff in the kitchen. You can do your inventory, and you can partner because I wanted to do a ghost kitchen, so partner with the third party services like Uber and Uber Eats, and I mean DoorDash and so on. So I was going through those middlemen vendors, and they actually there was one called CloudKitchens.com who quoted me 5,500 a month. That's everything included plus rent and utilities. But this other place that I found in Glendora, next to my dad's house, like right down the street, was on Route 66, famous location, but it was 6,500 only included rent, not utilities.
Get your
And
kicks
then I
on
kind of
Route 66, as the song goes.
yeah, so I haven't heard that one yet. Yeah, but yeah, dude. I mean, the concreteness, the abstractness. At some point, it's fun to kind of imagine what it's going to be like at every level, but yeah, it's also going to come with some challenge too.
I've been
Um,
thinking and perceiving similar things with my hydroponics and whatnot.
oh,
So it's like
oh, well,
the beginning is a lot of work. It's a lot of practical stuff, and at some point it turns into, well, I've got a couple of employees doing the day to day work, and now I'm going and doing that strategic stuff of, hey, I'm going to go eat at this restaurant. I'm going to request to talk to the chef and the manager, and I'm going to bring samples. And I'm going to be like, this is what I can provide. I can get it to you same day fresh. And the reason why we want to get it same day fresh isn't just because of the taste. It's because of the nutrient quality of the product itself. 8 hours after a vegetable is harvested, over 30% of the nutrients are gone. By the time it reaches our stores, over 50% of the nutrient value of that product is gone.
whoa. First marker, what was the percentage again? Can
Eight
you say that
hours,
first part?
30 something percent.
Jesus. Oh my God. I mean, I've been way more attuned to my diet and what I'm putting in my body as of late, and because my awareness is so fresh on it, that sounds striking.
Yeah, it is. And it's so like if you've ever cut a piece of lettuce that you've grown yourself and you look at it, there's this like white milky substance that pools where you cut it from the stem. That white milky substance is what has all the antioxidants. And by the time it gets to the store, that stuff is not there anymore. It's already essentially degraded.
What happens to that sticky substance by the time it gets to the market? Like it evaporates. It
It's just like nuclear physics. It half life decays. Just like any other living organism, it decays and breaks down into its baser components.
I don't know if I told you. I Brittany and I started a garden in our backyard. I, yeah. we we've got like two garden beds and then also two big planters. They're like metallic baskets,
Hmm.
and we've got a bunch of vegetables right now that are they're not. No, I think we have maybe like three plants that are producing lightly. We have a blueberry plant tree actually that is starting to no, the blackberry and the raspberry, the ones that are showing. We've got like a bunch of lettuce and broccoli and we have an avocado tree. We went to town because there was this sale happening not far away from our house of this guy that was just. Uh, I mean, it was at first we thought he was going out of business. When we actually got there, I was talking to him thinking that he was, and he told me no. It's just, I guess it was the way the marketing, the language kind of sounded. I was like, oh man, they're going out. But that's why they're on clearance, you know. Anyways, we got a lot of stuff.
Well, that's the first
And
step in
really,
self sustainability is being able to grow your own food. And
when you think about the zombie apocalypse, not to get too drastic, but when you think about calamitous events,
yeah,
that's when self sustainability will show its true value. Most, I mean, it already does in the virtue of keeping you self sustained. But when you need it the most, when it's scarce in the markets because prices have gone too high, or
now think
worse.
about the issues here in America from a, you know, apart from just the lack of nutrients in our food and the amount of junk food that we have, and the factory farming of animals and using hormones to increase their growth rate from a natural point of view, which, yeah, the meat's more tender, but you're feeding those animals shit, therefore you're eating shit. Um, Also, the energy density, like an animal eats a vegetable or some form of plant, it gets
Yeah.
about 90% of the energy from that plant. We eat the animal, we get a lot less than 90% of the energy density back. While a pound of meat has more
Interesting.
calories than a pound of rice, you can grow 10 pounds of rice with less water than you can grow a pound of beef.
Oh, now the water statistics on raising beef, yeah, that is, I heard is huge. But the 90%, that first statistic you sourced right now is really, I found that awesomely interesting.
It's between
When
60 and
that,
90. I don't remember the exact number.
but there's two. It sounded like he described it in two steps. First, from its natural state, then to there's a secondary state, and then the third state would be when the person is by the time they're ready to eat it. Uh, and the difference in each of those states are the loss of
Essentially, solar energy, because if you think about it, everything is entropy, and entropy is a system. All of the energy on this planet we get from the sun hitting the planet. That's where all the plants get their energy. It's from the sun. It's from photosynthesis. That's what they use to create the sugars and the antioxidants and all of the amino acids and things like that. And they pull some of the base materials they need from the soil. They pull some of the base materials they need from the air. Some plants take materials from the air, so like beans are nitrogen fixers. So they pull nitrogen from the air and they distribute it and infuse it into the soil at the root system. Corn
wow.
consumes nitrogen from the soil. And the Native Americans called these three plants the Holy Sisters, uh, or the Three Sisters. I mean, the Three Sisters. Been
Three
stuck in
sisters.
Christianity stuff recently. The Three
Oh,
Sisters.
those
Um,
Trinity sisters.
And the three sisters are corn, beans, and squash. Squash is a cover crop, and it grows at the ground level. Cover crops smother weeds and plants that you don't want. Beans climb up the stalk of the corn plant and provide nitrogen into the ground. The corn, of course, provides the stalk for the beans to grow on, and it pulls the nitrogen from the ground that the beans put in. So it's this dynamic system of harmony that allows growth to occur simultaneously in the same space. Now, if you think about Nikola Tesla, and I'm going to butcher this quote, I'm going to paraphrase it, but he talks about how if you want to truly succeed in life, you have to look at the natural systems and tap into them, not to extract energy from the system, but just like how an economy is supposed to work, flow
Right.
the energy through your part of the system and back into the whole system to sustain yourself.
That is so interesting. So when I think about that, it makes me wonder if there's other kinds of. I mean, clearly that's the implication from the Nikola Tesla quote that there's other types of natural combinations that symbiotically, help each other in the growing process and beyond the growing process too. So in your example of squash, what was it corn and potato?
Corn and beans.
Corn and beans. Uh, so the growing process of what they give out through the soil and what they take in from it, I mean,
It
there's
balances out.
balances out perfectly, which is awesome. So are there other like not magical but naturalistically magical combinations like that?
Absolutely, and that's what biodiversity
Mm.
is in general. So if you look at an old growth forest and you analyze its soil content, within the soil is a massive mycelium network. Not just a mycelium network, there's tons of different types of bacteria and other microorganisms that break things down into their base nutrients and infuse it into the soil. Plant root networks interface with the mycelium networks. So if you cut down a tree in a forest, a stump remains. It can't photosynthesize. Arguably, most people would say that's a dead tree. It's been cut down. It's just a stump. No.
Yeah.
If there's a healthy mycelium network in the
What would you
ground,
say?
the mycelium network will make sure that that tree gets nutrients and sugars from other trees that have an abundance. That's where we get the
Wow.
classical idea in fantasy of a mother tree or a father tree in the forest. And it's generally the largest tree because it's on the most resource rich spot in the forest. It has an abundance of resources, and it will, through the mycelium network, share its resources with every other plant in the system,
Perfect
regardless of
analogy.
the species.
What a perfect analogy to like a natural law resource-based economic system.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the way it's supposed to just mirror the way the natural ecology really functions. and where there's a scarcity, it's shared by an area of relative abundance,
Right.
and it equals out the deficiencies and stabilizes the abundances. So, like, I mean, the whole market dynamic of nature is itself the most raw form of market system that there is, in a sense, between you and access to the resource growing on the branches, and putting a layer of abstraction is the way I've been thinking about it lately. Anything, any kind of system, whether it's socialism, capitalism, communism, and then the freest form of it being, Adam Smith capitalism. Uh, in all of those forms, you have labor for income as a component, where there is a middleman, an abstraction with a number value, for which we, price every single interaction of resource scarcity out there. So I don't
So
know.
here's
When you think about
something
climate,
scary. Biodiversity. Since 1970, the size of the animal populations for which data is available has declined by 69%. That's birds, insects, deer, bison, elephants, lions, all of it. 69%. In the last 26 years, 75% of the insect population does not exist. They have died because of increased pesticide use. Now, think about this. You go hiking through the woods. You get a bunch of ticks on you. The reason why you get a bunch of ticks on you is because their natural predators have declined. Because we've eliminated them, whether it's through poison or destroying their natural habitat and food sources.
so interesting how removing one element of the ecosystem affects the whole ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. It's a
Where you
cascading
have
event.
and the pests that are the pests today, like you're describing, would have been the prey of some predator that we knocked out of the whole ecological system.
Yep. We have disrupted the balance of the natural order.
Do you Okay, so we kind of we're at 3:30, so I'm going to be mindful of your time, and I told Brittany also that I try to jump off around 3:30. But closing remark here, just about um, going back to the vehicle of the presidential elections. Like, what if you really want to invoke a sort of change um, into a better way of doing things in an organized fashion? In this case, maybe self-sustainability, like we've been talking about. Um, I mean, how important is the presidential cycle? How relevant is it towards this goal? And yeah, I guess those two questions.
It
Yeah.
could be used as a force for good, but in reality, what needs to happen is every single American citizen needs to stop participating in the existing system.
How so?
Every single American citizen, every single family. So if we look at how families used to be set up, they were more clan based. You'd have
Yeah.
a parents who would have 20 children, and then those children would have dozens of children. And you'd have this massive family, and they'd all live within the same relative county. They would all help each other when one would be more abundant than the next. They'd all have their unique skills. It's essentially a little tiny civilization, little tiny
Yeah.
community. The people who run everything right now have that. They have their clans. The rest of us do not, because we have been crushed by the economic system, and it has made it difficult for us to be able to afford to have multiple children, to afford to buy a home, to afford to plant a garden and maintain it because we're too busy with the 9 to 5. Now,
Yeah.
in order to solve this problem,
Wage
what we
slavery.
really need is we need to say fuck the government at
Yeah.
the federal level. We don't give a fuck about you until we get X, Y, and Z done. Then we're coming for your ass. We're going to ask you all to resign, and we're going to amend the Constitution to include basic human rights such as food, shelter, etc. But in order
Right.
for us to get to that point, We actually need to build it first. So we need an education system. And the education system needs to put the middle finger to the man and say, we don't give a fuck about you, your rules, your regulations. We are doing hydroponics. We are doing regenerative agriculture. We are doing aquaculture, aquaponics. We are going to do permaculture. We are going to take our national forests and our state forests, and we are going to bring back biodiversity. Every square, every cubed meter of land should have an abundance of plants that can either be used for food or medicine across the entire continent. We're going to and we're all going to do this ourselves at the individual community level. Once we have
Amazing.
done that,
Yeah.
then that's when we can stop the economic system and say, hey, if you don't change these things, all of us can survive without you. We don't need
Yeah.
you. You need us. And that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid that the the American and even just the global population will figure that out and start doing it. Because when they start doing it, we have the power. Whoever controls the food and now today energy has the
Yeah.
power. And if the people control their own food, suddenly they're going to be healthier. We're not going to have a bunch of cancer or diabetes or heart
Mm.
issues because all of that comes from our food. There's currently a lawsuit against Roundup for blood cancer because all of these Roundup ready products are genetically modified that the Roundup won't kill the plant, but it will kill everything else around it. And that ends up running off into our water system. And then because we don't do natural filtration, we just add chemicals to our water. We end up consuming some of that, and it gets into the air, it gets into the food, and we end up with cancer. That cannot continue to happen. Like, we are destroying.
Self-sustainability.
We are
Yeah.
all on a spaceship, and we are destroying the environmental system. And if we go
Mhm.
too far, we will run out of oxygen, and we will suffocate and die.
What I appreciate you about Dakota is that I think you and I share, and maybe I don't know if it's known formally. It certainly is called systems theory. I don't know if you're consciously aware that that's the approach you
Yeah.
seem to largely, and me too. I mean, I really think that is the ultimate scientific perspective, the lens you apply across
First
situations.
principles systems theory.
Yeah. Man, this brings me to a number of places, but I know this is going to be my outro, so I'll just end in this note if you indulge me. Um, I do think that the market system. Um, we're going to end with a memory forgetter. Anyways, man. Well, do you have any closing thoughts?
I think I can't top what I said earlier, so.
I don't think you can either, man. We gotta
Wait,
do this again, dude.
and when I get my greenhouse and all that going down here, you y'all are gonna have to come over and take a look at it.
Yeah. All right, dude. I'm excited. I'm very excited. Uh, and likewise, dude. When let me know when you're down here. We can throw in some parties lately. They've been our turnout numbers have been growing.
Nice.
So,
We'll
anyways,
get drunk and
definitely.
have a little bit of weed and talk about philosophy and all this around the people who
Absolutely.
don't think like this.
Hey, don't forget the mushrooms. Absolutely, absolutely.